So hello and happy Friday. Welcome to Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers, episode number 122. Today is Friday, August the 20th. And guess what tomorrow is, by the way? Saturday, third Saturday of the month, World Beekeeping Day. So for those of you who are already in Australia and that part of the world, today is tomorrow. I know, it's weird. World Beekeeping Day. Guess what else? Tomorrow, Saturday, is. Also, it's National Beekeeping Day in the United States, so they just go together. So make sure that you, of all people, know what day is Beekeeping Day. By the way, you can listen to this on Podbean. It's called The Way to Bee, so as a podcast while you're driving, doing chores, mowing your yard, something like that. And this is The Way to Bee. So I'm glad you're here. We have a lot to cover, so we're going to jump right into it. Let's get started. First question comes from Olin from Folsom, Louisiana. Curious as to if you ever gave thought to incorporate the Flow Hive frames into horizontal beehives. This question comes up a lot, so we're going to talk about it right now. No, I haven't. If I have a horizontal beehive, I have two right now. The long Langstroth hive, which the Flow frames are compatible with, and I also have the Layens hive now, which is occupied. Video coming up someday soon. The thing is, when you put your Flow frames in there, and everybody seems to want to put everything together in one big, fancy, super involved piece of equipment. I don't like, personally, you can do what you like, I don't like putting Flow frames in a horizontal format, and the reason is this. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is we have to have the bees migrating horizontally into it. Now, some people want to do a special adaptation that they put on their long Langstroth hive, and now it bumps up. So now, is it really horizontal, or did we just create two levels to a horizontal hive format? And one of the things you have to think about when you're putting Flow frames into anything, they have to tip. When it comes time to harvest the honey, they have to tip back towards the drain plug 2 degrees. A lot of the hive configurations that people have sent me, they show me the pictures of their great work. Awesome carpenters out there doing terrific stuff, making adaptations. Once you adopt it for Flow frames, it's not good for standard frames anymore. So then you're putting those Flow frames in there and you're counting on the bees working them, and then you have to have a segment of your horizontal format that's going to tip and allow you to drain it. So that created a break. So there has to be a gap somewhere, some way to isolate that from the rest of the hive so that it can do that. You have a complex hive on your hands. Plus, you're going to have to put some kind of queen excluder in there so that the bees can get through it, and then you're counting on them to create that surplus. So here's what I do. Since I have both, I just go ahead and use Flow frames on standard vertical Langstroth configurations. The horizontal hives are already convenient enough. You're going to have to extract the honey the normal way with an extractor, or you're going to uncap, you're going to cut it out, crush it, strain it, and so on. But have I ever thought to incorporate the Flow frames? I've thought about it because people ask so often, but I've never done it, and those are the reasons why. By the way, in the opening sequence, some people want to know what kind of flowers those are. Those are cosmos. Cosmos of all different colors. We have a question related to that coming up in today's questions and answers. If you want to know where to submit your own question, go to thewaytobee.org and fill out a form there, or you can write down in the comments section below, or you can join us in a number of different areas, which will be described in the video description down below here, so you can follow those links and find out how to get connected. Now, this next question sent me down a rabbit hole, kind of, because, if you've been a beekeeper for any amount of time, you probably feel like you pretty well know about the properties of honey and what makes it crystallize and what doesn't and so on. But Tom Jefferson sent me this question. Seeing the bees on the cosmos brings up a question I've been wondering about this summer. Do the honeybees see different varieties of a particular species of flower as one large patch, or will they visit the same? Okay, so the same colors. So when you look at cosmos, there are a bunch of different colors. So there's red ones, burgundy, white, orange, yellow, and so on, and some mixed colored petals on there. So I did follow the bees around, went all over the cosmos field. We have acres of them this year. This is my first year with them, and the bees are on those. So I also looked up the protein profile of cosmos, and it's right at 19.5%. Bees need 20%. Just for comparison, white clover would be almost 25% protein content in its pollen for the bees, and therefore more valuable. But cosmos are way up there for protein quality in their pollen. So that was cool too. So the thing is, I'm following the bees around. Would they go from a white one to a burgundy one, for example? Yep, they do. Then why is that important? Well, because bees are floral constant foragers. What the heck does that mean? Well, it means that when they go out, for example, on dandelions, they're only going to visit dandelions. They don't go from dandelions to clover to something else. So that's why they're such great pollinators, by the way. There's no cross-pollination going on with the honeybees, like those that go to fruit-bearing trees like apple trees. They'll go to other apple species, but they won't jump from apples to pears, for example. So this, again, makes them very good pollinators. Now, then we have those that get the entire buffet, like bumblebees. They go everywhere. But there are some native bee species that are species specialists. They only go to sunflowers, or they only go to some other floral variety and nothing else. So, honeybees do go to all the different cosmos flowers. It's still the same species of plant, still the same line of cosmos, but individual subspecies of the same plant. So they certainly do go to all of them. And that's good news for me because I have a mixed bag of different colors, mixed cosmos. I'll put a link down in the video description. I get them from Eden Brothers, and they have a couple of different mixes there. So I'll show you the mix that I've gotten because now at least I can say your bees will go on these. Not only that, the cosmos are going to bloom well beyond the goldenrod, which goldenrod we're into right now. So they're going to go beyond that, so they will have that resource later on when Maximilian sunflowers also come in. Cosmos are technically in the sunflower family. They're just small, but super rich in nectar and protein. If I get a nectar flow out of that, I'm going to be very impressed. So that was that one. I thought I had a question here about why things crystallize, and I think that's coming up later, but that answers that question. Question number 3, jumping right in. We have from Brent, and it says, I found your channel recently and been watching almost everything. Thank you for the great content. Thank you for watching and submitting a question. A few years ago, you talked about using paper wasps to protect the apiary. Unless I missed the follow-up video, could you talk about the results? Were they successful in the long term at driving away yellow jackets? Did the paper hornets leave the repurposed beehives? Do you still employ this method? So they're paper wasps, and there's a lot of wasp subspecies, by the way. And so this was the experiment, and it is ongoing, and they are here, and they're prevalent. And the whole thinking behind encouraging the presence of paper wasps is because they don't attack and predate upon my honeybees. What they do is push out through competition and through their physical presence by nests. So if we have a bunch of paper wasp nests, and I'll put a link below so that you can see exactly what these wasps are like, the ones that I'm working with. They're what I consider friendly wasps. And when they're around the yellow jackets, also wasps get pushed out. That's my philosophy. That's my practical citizen science homegrown test. So yes, they're still there. They still inhabit unoccupied beekeeping equipment, and I also make little houses for them. And then I glue their nests in, and that's what you'll see in that video. So it's best to get those answers right there. Do they make a difference? Now that's hard to quantify, because if we still see yellow jackets zipping around, you know, the power of suggestion might get to me. I might be thinking there are fewer yellow jackets. I definitely see more of these brown paper wasps. So their numbers are definitely up, and people are not being stung. And I haven't found a ground wasp nest this year. So I think it's working. I don't know for sure, but I'm using one species to push out another because these friendlier wasps don't attack the bees. Yellow jackets do, but of course, prime yellow jacket attack season isn't here yet. So that's what I'm using. I can't validate it. I just would rather see those. I even had them inside my bee shed where I was looking at my observation hive. Big nest of them straight over my head. They don't even care that I'm there. They're very subtle, very easygoing. Next question, number 4. Elisa from Luzerne, PA. Honey and crystallization. Who cares about honey and crystallization? Only everybody. Last year's honey was clear. This year's honey is cloudy and will probably crystallize sooner than later. All honey was capped and tested with a refractometer and was at 18% or below water content. 18% or below won't ferment. Okay. I know honey will crystallize, but my question is, what would make this honey so different from last year? Bees in the same place did not move them, whether foraging from different plants. Do you have a list or know where I can get one that would let me know what plants or flowers would make honey crystallize faster than others? So my question right back to everyone sitting there that wants to know what plants make honey crystallize more, I say to you, what would you do if you knew? Let's sit back and really think about it. So let's say we know that right now goldenrod is coming in here in the state of Pennsylvania. Now goldenrod is known because of its particulates, because of its types of sugar. See, this is more complex than a lot of people think. It's the kind of sugars that your bees are getting in the form of nectar from that plant as well. So if we knew that goldenrod and asters and sunflowers and rapeseed and other things make honey in its raw form that would crystallize quicker than some other sources of nectar, what would you do about it? Probably nothing. So, because those are great nectar sources, what do we care that honey crystallizes? By the way, what does that look like? Honey in the jar when it's crystallized. Ta-da, right there. Honey in the jar that does not crystallize. Ta-da, right there. Spring honey. Fall honey. Spring honey may get a little cloudy over time as it passes, and it may start to crystallize, but is there something that you can do to stop that? Crystallized honey, by the way, raw honey as it is likely to appeal to certain people. Guess who doesn't like it the most? By survey, kids. Kids don't like crystallized honey, or what some people call set honey. That honey has set, so it's not its liquid form anymore because now it has a texture, it's a solid material. So somebody else asked, and I think it's in here today, so I might as well answer it now. Crystallized honey, lower water content? Not necessarily, because when you reliquefy it and run it through your refractometer again, you're going to find out it's still at 15.7 or 16% or whatever it was before it crystallized. So that's interesting too, and we can satisfy that question. So the thing really is what you do with your honey and how important it is for it to be able to crystallize. Because if that's what you want, and we have people, let's be honest, we have people that want crystallized honey. They want to scoop it and they want it to be in a semi-solid form so they can put it on their toast and watch it melt and all these other things. Other people, it comes down to mouth feel. Because crystallized honey has a little granular feel to it. Yuck, some people don't like that at all. Those people are going to want the spring honey, which comes largely from clover. So then what happens when you get something that's kind of in between, now that we're on the topic? Look at this little jar that's partially crystallized, but partially still liquid honey. So then at the top, see that foam? What do you think that foam is? That foam at the top is a defense mechanism for the honey to protect itself from being contaminated. So, what is that called? If you can put down in the comments section what you think that's called, let's just skip over that. Hydrogen peroxide. So when it forms this foam here, it gets hydrogen peroxide on it. You should look that up too if you're curious about that. But let's think about this. In order for it to crystallize, particles have to be in the honey. Therefore, the cover shot of today's video, you saw this. You know what that is? That's a milk strainer. So this thing, and I tried to get it nailed down to how many microns does a filter have to filter in order to take enough particulates out so that it would not crystallize. So we have honey on the shelf that's been run through this filter, which right now is a 75 micron filter. Now if you do that, is it currently in its raw form once it's been through any kind of filter? Well, you have to tell people that are getting the honey from you that that's been through a micron filter, so the particles aren't there, because there are a lot of people that want particles in it, and they want to have bits of pollen in it, because some people believe that when they eat the honey, that they get a benefit from the pollen in the honey that will help them with their seasonal allergies if they get raw, regional, seasonal honey. It doesn't do you one bit of good to be in the fall getting raw honey that was harvested in spring for your fall allergies. Now the other thing is, I have to say it, we don't have scientific evidence supporting that that works. In fact, we have scientific evidence going the other way, that pollen ingested by people who have extreme allergies could actually have an allergic reaction to the honey that has the pollen particles in it. Therefore, if you are one of those people that has a very sensitive allergy, unless you're under the care of a physician, you would want to get honey that's nice and clear and been through some kind of filter. Now, I think the filter to get pollen particles out has to be very fine. I think it's down in the 50 micron range. And if you know that exact number, please write down in the comments section below this video. But this milk filter that I'll give you a link to, it is on Amazon. And if you click that link, I do get a percentage if it's a qualifying purchase, whatever that means. Not everything you buy on Amazon will give somebody a nickel or whatever you get on that sale. So the thing is, we have those on the shelf and you have to run it through it while it's warm. So the honey that you just got out from your backyard apiary, that you run through your extractor or whatever your processing system is. So even Flow Hive honey, if that comes from a source that has these particulates or has the sugar content, because high in glucose can also cause crystallization because it does not readily liquefy. So those are interesting things too, because in order for anything to form a crystal, it needs something to build on. So these particles have to exist in suspension and they have to move around and collide with each other and start to crystallize and spread until the whole jar eventually looks like that. So it's another cautionary tale. If you're new to harvesting honey this year and you're doing it in the fall and you're going to put your honey in a 5-gallon pail and hold it there while the bubbles get out or whatever it does, if it solidifies in that pail, now you're into a band system that would warm that pail and everything else. So you want to get it while it's liquid into all these smaller jars as backyard beekeepers because it's more manageable. So how hot should it be? We're going to talk about all that stuff. So this filter right here, this milk filter, which people pour coffee through and wine and who knows what else, that can take 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Is that important to you as a person who's liquefying and managing and moving honey around? It is if you're a backyard beekeeper and you want to keep the raw properties of the honey, flavor profile, and not degrade it. You don't want to go higher than, get ready to write this down, you don't want to heat your solidified honey higher than 105 degrees Fahrenheit or 40.5 degrees Celsius to reliquefy it. You don't want to flash heat it either. You want to raise these temperatures gradually, and you can hold it there for an extended period of time at 105, and it will not degrade the honey, and it can still be considered raw honey. So you can have it in the jar set like this, or crystallize, whichever term you prefer. You can reheat it so that it can be liquid for your customer, but you need to tell them that it will potentially re-liquefy. Unless, while it's warm, you run it through some kind of filter. And then you have to tell people that you did that too. The big thing is to disclose everything you've done to the honey after you've taken it out of the hive, so that the person buying honey from you, if it's a cottage industry for you, it's a backyard sideliner thing, you need to tell people what's gone on with it. So, and there is something else that I discovered, which a lot of people are not going to want to hear about, but there's something called, I'm probably going to mispronounce it, Trehalose, Trehalose. So if you look that up, it's something that they've been experimenting with, an additive to the honey that apparently is already present in honey, just not in the percentage necessary to prevent crystallization of honey. So if you Google that and you look it up, it's a 2% solution that prevents crystallization of honey. It's research that's been published, I believe, in 2020. So you can read that too if you want to know about it. But these, from a backyard perspective, are the things you should know. Number one, what does it matter? What's blooming out there, as long as it's giving nectar and protein to your bees so they can sustain themselves. What are you going to control beyond your own yard within 2 miles in every direction where your foragers might be going? So knowing that it's out there and that has a potential to crystallize does really nothing as far as your ability to control the environment. So what you control is after it comes out of your hives and goes into your jars in your processing system, and these are your options. Filter it. Don't filter it. High water content. Watch that hydrogen peroxide form on it. And spring honey. Floral sources, that's the stuff that you're going to know, will not crystallize. Crystallized honey is not bad. It's good. In fact, if it's crystallized, it really demonstrates that that is raw honey. That doesn't mean all raw honey will crystallize, but if it does crystallize, that's likely to be raw honey. So that's it. The other thing is you can reliquify it later and go from there. So all good stuff. But knowing which flowers do it doesn't change anything unless you have total control over everything within the foraging range of your bees. Don't obsess, just enjoy honey in all its forms. Next question, number 5, comes from James Carpenter, Derby, Kansas. Oh, this is about queens dying. As I experienced a queen bee dying while marking her for no apparent reason, I used a one-hand queen capture tool. She was not pinched in any way, but once I slid the door open, the capture tool, and closed it, she was curled up at the bottom and looked dead. I pulled her out and did not know what to do, so I gently rubbed her. I spritzed her with a tiny bit of water. I blew on her for about 15 minutes to no avail. Several nurse bees were trying to revive her. This whole time as well, I went ahead and marked her, then set her on top of some frames where the nurse bees hauled her down into the hive. I was sad. Did some research to find out that this may be a more common occurrence where a queen faints, then recovers. Unfortunately, I was not aware of this until I returned to my computer to look it up. I'm wondering if any research has been done on this, how often others see this happen. I will check in a few days to see if my queen ever recovered or if they are preparing queen cells for a new one. Thanks. Okay, this whole thing about queens fainting, queens passing out because they're sensitive, or some people say, because I saw this in a forum, they're drama queens because they faint when they're being handled. They don't do well. But I will say this: I have never personally had a queen bee faint when being handled, and I pick them up all the time, frequently. Grab them, pick them up, I look them over, I put them in my little marking tubes and stuff, and I've never had a queen faint like that. But I will say this: if it happens to you, don't do the things that are described here. In other words, rubbing the queen, blowing on the queen, doing anything else to modify or try to resuscitate a queen. They are not like little mammals. These are insects. They respirate differently. Rubbing them, they have protective coatings on their bodies and everything else. So the best thing for a queen that has apparently passed out or become incapacitated for whatever reason, frozen in place, then put her back on the hive right away. If you're marking the queen, go ahead, finish your marking step, let her dry off, let the paint dry, put her right back on there, and let the bees attend to her, because the workers, the nurse bees, the retinue of bees that attend the queen exclusively are going to be licking her and reviving her and doing everything they can to resuscitate her and let her know everything's okay. If you've ever had a queen faint on you in this way or become incapacitated, then you can write about that down in the comment section below. But then, of course, yes, check and see. Where would you find the queen if she didn't make it? They're going to be dragging her out of there. If she's dead, they're going to discard the queen. So, apparently they do revive. Everything could be okay. There's nothing for you to do other than restore her to the nurse bees as soon as possible. Get that going. So it's question number 5. If you've had a queen fainting experience, it'd be cool to read about it. Write your story. I'd love to see it. Yes, I know it's hot outside. I'm drinking hot chocolate too. Did I tell you what the temperature was here? I may have skipped over that. 82 degrees Fahrenheit outside. That's 28 Celsius. Super humid, super damp, and terrible out there. Question number 6, Timothy from Cologne. And it says, let's see, long story longer. I'm going to go ahead and read the whole thing. I think we're going to jump ahead to the long story longer. I have about 4 to 5 deep boxes of extra honey that I will need to extract this fall. I'm looking to grow my apiary to around 15 to 20 hives in the future and possibly larger if things go well. So that's a pretty good expansion. 20 colonies, a lot of work for the backyard beekeeper, unless it's your only job, you're retired or something like that. I don't like that number. I have that number. It's too much work. What size, make, model, style of a honey extractor would you recommend for small-time backyard beekeeper such as myself? Well, guess what I bought this year? Was it this year or last year? Anyway, on sale, Man Lake had a powered extractor. And what did I do with my old extractor? Gave it away to a new beekeeper because I'm super generous. Hand crank, stainless steel, 2-basket style extractor. So here's what I bought. I'm going to make a long story short right here. I paid $1,076.70 because it was on sale through Man Lake. It is the 8-4-frame electric extractor. This is the model number, HH163. So you can do 4 frames flat against the baskets, or you can put them as a radial extractor, and side by side there's little clips that hold it in there, 2. So 4 sets of 2, so you get 8 frames, full deeps. And of course you have to put them in right, but there's no way to put them in wrong the way this thing is set up. So it's kind of foolproof because we want the thicker back of the frame to face the outside. Why? Well, because the cells in the frames are angled, and if they're not angled the correct way, you're just seeding the honey in the cells instead of slinging it out. So the bottoms of the frames go towards the center, the backs of the frames go outward. Pretty simple stuff. And then it slings out. But there's a curious thing I'll say about this. So by the way, check that out. I get nothing from Man Lake for mentioning that. I also get nothing for mentioning the other stuff I talked about here today, other than maybe this thing. But moving on, when you're running that extractor, when you're hand cranking them, good exercise, whatever, something for your nephews, your grandkids, your nieces, all your little helpers can sit there and crank and watch honey sling out of the extractor, but that gets old really fast. And here's what we learn. If you put it in a power extractor, this is why I highly recommend you get the kind that has a motor. The other thing is I noticed when I looked at the picture at Man Lake, the motor was different. The motor on the current offering of that exact same model number is horizontal off of that drive shaft. Mine, the motor is in line with the drive shaft and sticks up right on top, a little different. Same model though, same function, probably same basket and everything else. But when you leave that thing running for like 20 or 30 minutes while you're uncapping and doing other things that you can do, honey is still slinging out of that. So what I realized after getting a power extractor is that the honey will come out more completely than even with the hand crank thing, even though I was really zinging it, really slinging honey out of that. So you still see the honey driplets flying against that inner wall and running down for 20 or 30 minutes at a medium speed. So highly recommend you get one. Those things are cool. And currently I have 7 hives, would like to expand in the future. Don't want to waste my money on something that will be too small and I will outgrow right away. I think it's a good size. 8 frames at one time, pretty darn good. So it also, of course, handles the shallow or medium frames. Number 7, moving along. Mike from Ottawa, Ontario. I'm using the bee scanning app that you featured in one of your videos. It showed us a very low mite infestation in my 2 hives. Have you found the app to be reliable? And I'm glad this question was asked because I do want to talk about that bee scanning app. And yes, I still use it. It's a great way to catalog colonies, but it cannot be used, in my opinion, to say that a colony is clear of mites. What it can be used for, and where it really saves you time, is once you're pulling brood frames, which frames inside your hive are going to have the most mites on them in the brood area. The nurse bees that are on the uncapped or open brood, those will be the ones that will have the most mites, more so than a frame of capped brood. Because mites on the frames where the larvae is still open and not yet capped, that's where the most mites will be present on the bodies of the nurse bees, waiting to scoot into those cells just before they make the caps and close them up for their pupa stage. So those are the bees that you want to count. Those are the bees that you take your bee scanning app, I'll put a link to that down in the video description below. You take your cell phone and you photograph 4 sections of the frame with all those nurse bees on it. This is how I use the app. If it picks up a large number of mites on those bees, then I know for sure we're going to have to treat the hive. So 3% or more is my treatment threshold. 3 mites per 100 bees. So when that comes up, and plus it saves the photos, you get the history of the hive. Once you get your account with them, it was free, I believe, then you, of course, can check each picture to see if it's really a mite and not just a bee tongue or something like that. And it's pretty darn accurate, pretty good. Now, what if I photograph those frames with that scanning system and I don't see any mites, or just one? Then that's a hive that I'm still going to have to do the mite count on to verify that it's clean. So I don't trust it to give me a clean bill of health for a hive regarding mites. I do trust it for picking out right away a colony that will require intervention against mites. I hope that makes sense. Because the mites are often tucked into the abdomens of the bees, between those plates. They're very good at hiding. And unless we're seeing the underside of those bees, that app really can't pick up on them. See? So you have to do the mite count with your sugar shake, your alcohol, or your detergent wash system. So that's a good question. I'm glad that was asked. Bee scanning, check it out. Load the app on your phone, and it will save you a lot of time because, like I said, if you get a high mite count right away on that thing, you know for sure you're going to treat it. So you don't even have to do the sugar shake or the alcohol wash or something else. So that's clear. Question number 8. Suzanne writes, just discovered something about the adult wasp, and I'm wondering how the hive gate can help. These are hive gates. It's an entrance. We're doing evaluations of it this year. So look up hive gate. The adult wasp only feeds on liquid during the first part of the season, and then there is lots of larvae in their nest. The adult wasp feed on the protein-rich liquid that their larvae regurgitate as some nectar from some flowers. I'm sure it was nectar from some flowers. Anyway, in the fall they produce less larvae, but there is an increase in the adult population of wasps. That is a prime time that the wasp will attack and want to enter beehives to steal their stored nectar and honey. Few attempts to do so before then. This raises the following question. Is putting a hive gate at the beginning of the season of any use, for one? Secondly, since what the wasps are looking for are adult bees to feed their larvae, thus attack them mostly outside the hive for the greater part of the season, shouldn't one think of a mechanism that will give the bees help when wasps attack them outside the hive? I'm going to put a link down in the video description next to this question that will show you a video of yellow jacket wasps attacking beehives. So let's go through this. All of this is true. When you see the yellow jacket adult wasps are out there, adult wasps can't eat meat. They just can't. So they cut away at decomposing carcasses, so they feed on carrion. They cut away little chips and pieces and haul them off. When the bees sometimes are kicking out drones, and there's partially developed drones, or you have maybe hygienic stock that's pulling out pupa stage bees in development, and they toss them because maybe there was a varroa mite in there. You'll see in early morning, you'll see some of these yellow jackets on them, chewing them apart, getting bits and pieces off and flying away with them. And just as described here, they get to their nest, they're developing larvae. Those are the little meat eaters. So they will put that little food pellet, that little protein pellet in there. That little larvae will eat that pellet, and then it regurgitates, as described, some honeydew out. And then that's the reward for the adult wasp for bringing that protein source to the larvae, and that's what keeps them shuttling back and forth. Then they put out that little driplet, and then they ingest that sweet nectar that's given by the larvae. So the other thing is, if we put this hive gate, and I have these on several hives this year, so we're looking at what they're doing, venting. Right now it's really hot, and they're venting through these, and these are the only entrances, by the way, because we have to use it the way the inventor described it, otherwise we're really not assessing it. But here's the other thing. Robbing occurs not just from wasps, but even from other honeybees And here's the other thing. What can't get through these? I don't know if you've ever seen these big bumblebees flying into your colonies. Bumblebees, all different species and sizes, subspecies, can't get through these. European hornets don't go in, but European hornets also just land on the landing board. They're very efficient. Grab a bee right off the landing board, fly to a nearby bush, nip off its head, nip off its abdomen, and fly away with its thorax, which is where all the muscle tissue is and the concentration of protein is that it's going to feed its larvae. So they do this extremely fast. But we cut down on and eliminate their ability to gain access to the hive. When you see yellow jackets attacking a beehive, sure, they could get a bee that's out foraging somewhere. They could go and attack it on, but just like other insects, just like the honeybee, they go where their food resources are concentrated, and that means the apiary, that means getting to the hive where they reside. And now we have a target-rich environment for them to get protein resources, or also get nectar without having to go back and feed one of the larvae and get a little triplet out of them for it. So this happens at the end of the year because their numbers are increasing. Their colonies are at their max. Their nests it's not a perennial nest like we have with beehives. Beehives stay the same, perennial, year after year potentially, exact same spot. With the wasps, they're going to produce a bunch of queens at the end of the year. They're all going to fly out. The nest gets abandoned, and it's not used through winter. So this is a period where a bunch of queens exist too that have to get as much nectar and build as much fat as they can going into winter so they can survive as a solitary wasp. And then in spring, each one of those queens will make its own nest. So pressure increases as we go from wasps, but from other bee species, that pressure is on through the year. So a weaker colony, which is really what these are designed for, smaller colonies that could not launch a significant defense force when they're attacked by the wasps, would benefit from these because even this, a small colony of bees, can defend themselves successfully against an onslaught of lots of wasp foragers. So yes, they work throughout the year. And the other benefit I would say would be that they might be doing some configuration inside the hive that's related to where the airflow exists, because here's the entrance of your hive. Right here, well in, is where the vent source is and where you would see brood concentrated. Where if these did not exist through the year, your brood would concentrate towards the entrance during the hot part of the year, like right now in August. And then later you plug this in, where's the vent now? Brood's up here, vent's in the back. So I think having it in there so that your bees can align their configuration to where their venting exists. And some people, of course, put these in tandem. Same thing, double the vent space, still have the defense mechanism that it provides. And the Asian giant hornet, which by the way, they just found another nest of those, and they're dealing with it in Washington State. Those can't get through those either. And they do move in. They do try to occupy a nest, defend it while they're consuming the resources inside. They can't get through these. So I would say there's a benefit to leaving it on throughout the year. Don't wait until they're actually being attacked or until the pressure is on. I don't see any real benefit yet to that. So that was question number 8. Good question. Number 9, Noah writing. I also wanted to ask if you think of one-handed queen catcher is easier or harder to use than just using one of those hair clip style queen cages as a catcher. I heard both and with explanations, but not with comparing them to each other. So what we're talking about, these are two different things. This is apples and oranges, and I'll tell you why. Here's your one-handed queen catcher. Here's the hair clip design style. This one, by the way, has a rubber band on it because some of them, these come from so many different companies because this has been so pirated. These are pirated too. The one-handed queen catcher has a specific design. It has a purpose, right? It's not just to hold the queen. This is so that you can mark your queen. So when you open this up and you catch your queen, some people try to use this to catch the queen. I think I would not do that because you risk smushing things while you chase her around the frame. I just pick her up, drop her in there, and you can drop her in there and she can't fly out because she's a laying queen and she's too heavy. And then you close this up, and now we push the plunger up here to get the queen up to the top, and then I can mark her. That's the purpose of this, to catch the queen so that I can mark her thorax. This is not for marking the queen. This is the hair clip style that we're talking about. This is designed so that, and you can, like you see the queen on the face of a frame, and you're going to do a bunch of work on this hive, or maybe you're doing a split. You see the queen, she's scooting around in there, you put this right over her, you collect her in there, and even if you get a couple of nurse bees with her, no problem. Now she's in here, and now you set this off to the side in the shade so you can keep her safe while you're moving all your frames around and doing all the shifting or splitting or whatever else you're doing, and then when you're done, you open it back up and reintroduce the queen into the new split or however you're managing your bees. So this is designed to collect and temporarily hold the queen. This is designed to catch the queen so that you can mark her. So these are two different functions, two different styles. So that's what that's all about. And so that's the advantage. You're not marking a queen with this. You're just temporarily holding her. And get your rubber bands on there, because if this stays open just a little bit and you set that thing in the shade somewhere outside the hive and you didn't make sure that that's closed and that queen can't get out of it, then you just lost your queen. Potentially. So those are the comparisons there. One-handed queen catcher and the hair clip style. This is from Michael Hall, question number 10. About 6 frames. Let's see, I bought 6 frames on July 16th. I took out the white plastic sheet under the 1/8" stainless mesh floor. I could not see any varroa, but saw 5 small caterpillars. So when we're talking about these plastic sheets, this is the bottom board of the hive. There's a screen, there's a plastic insert. Some people pull that out, especially in summertime. It's part of IPM. Integrated pest management, so that mites and things like that fall through the screen, get out of the hive, can't get back up in. Anyway, I could not see any varroa, but saw 5 small caterpillars that were thin and gray and soft, which I killed. I wonder what they are. Should I contact the chap I bought them off to tell him? I got 6 of his frames with bees on them, and of course brood, and about 1,000, it says 10,000 buckfast bees, which were put into my new Langstroth hive. I'm disappointed to see them. I'm keen, of course, what to do. Please can you advise? There's always something. I wish I'd drawn that catch plastic sheet much sooner than after a month of new colony being brought to its new location. Anyway, those little worms that you find, sometimes you find those in a bottom board or in a tray or underneath the screen that you have. If that screened area, and I highly recommend for those of you who are looking at bottom boards, for screened bottom boards, try to get the kind that you can close up. In other words, the screen is there, but there's a tray or removable core flute or plastic insert or something there that catches the debris that falls through it. Some people spray it with cooking spray, they put mineral oil on it or whatever to catch the varroa mites and things like that that fall through. But I highly recommend that you get the kind that you can close it up completely, for a number of reasons. One is we don't want other critters getting in there to feed on the debris and stuff that falls at the bottom, because pollen and everything else falls down there. Some people are not good, shocking but true, at cleaning out their bottom trays and at cleaning out those inserts, to the point where those inserts can even be jammed up and stuck. So I like the ones that have the removable trays. But you can get, these might be small hive beetle larvae, these might be waxworm larvae. You can get those things in your tray, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they are present up in your hive. So if there's access points around that, or if you've pulled things out, whatever's going on, the debris that falls out of your hive can attract those things. So here's the thing. How do you know when you see a little worm in the bottom of your tray, is that a waxworm or is that a small hive beetle larvae? There's differences, but the most obvious and immediate one, if you like to be cool and impress your friends, when you see that little gray colored larvae down there in the bottom and that little worm is crawling around, you say, I wonder if that's a small hive beetle larvae, and you pick it up and you roll it between your fingers. And it feels like a little piece of rubber. It's kind of tough. You say, oh, yep, small hive beetle larvae. Because if that's a little waxworm larvae down there, and the waxworm itself is the larvae, so you pick that up, you roll it between your fingers, oh, and it all smushed up. Poor thing, it's dead now. Soft-bodied, smushed up waxworm. Feels like rubber, doesn't smush up easily, small hive beetle larvae. The other thing is obvious sizes. Waxworm larvae get up to 3/4 inches in length. These are notes that I wrote just for you, so you know stuff. The wax moth larvae also have what's called, they each have 6 little insect legs up by their heads, so 3 pairs, right? But then if you've got wax moth larvae, they have something called prolegs that continue down the rest of their body, which look like little fake feet. So that's present in the wax moth larvae, not present in small hive beetle larvae. Small hive beetle larvae are attracted to light. They scoot towards light in darkness. They're only 0.37 inches long, so they're tiny. So either you've got really young wax moth larvae, or you've got maturing small hive beetle larvae. It's 0.37 inches long. Also look for tiny spines on their back running the length. So the back of it, the opposite the sides where the little feet are, along the back on the segments, you'll see a pair on each segment going down. Those are the small hive beetle larvae. But my favorite method for identifying them is to roll them in your fingers and see if they squish or not. Feel rubbery? Small hive beetles. Get squished easy? Wax moth larvae. So no, I wouldn't go back after the person that you got the bees from. They might be local and the wax moths came and laid eggs and stuff like that. This is kind of a long story here from Stephen Kidder. Recently moved to eastern Pennsylvania. I kept 4 successful colonies at my last home and was anxious to start at least 1 colony here. Found a local beekeeper through a local association and purchased 2 nukes. Those are nucleus colonies. They both had 5 solid frames of brood, eggs, resources, and healthy laying queens. I placed them in 10 frame deeps with a couple of frames of better comb and some foundationless frames, and they seemed to be doing very well. When the weather started getting particularly hot, I swapped the solid bottom board with screened ones below slatted racks. That was when I believe robbing began on one of the 2 hives. The next day I saw a large number of dead bees in front of the hive, an occasional death match between 2 bees rolling out of the hive and several individual bees falling to the ground in spasms after exiting the hive, eventually dying. I also noticed a lot of bees flying all around the hive and congregating in the middle of the screened bottom board outside the hive. I have no robbing screen, but I put the smallest entrance reducer I have, about 3/4 of an inch, on both hives. This morning, I inspected the threatened hive, expecting the worst, but was pleased to see the hive still had a healthy queen, capped brood, and food stores still. Foragers were still returning with pollen and nectar at a respectable rate. Are the bees on the hive, in front of the hive, likely half my bees and half robbers? Or more of one or the other? At this point, what else do you recommend I do to stop further robbing? Also, are the bees that are coming out and falling to the ground dying of battle stings from inside the hive? So that's all interesting stuff, but it ties in with what we were just talking about with those screened bottom boards. Screened bottom boards are open bottoms. Unless you have an insert, or this is also why I like the enclosed bottom board system. Because when they're open, it's just a screen there, everything that's going on inside that hive is putting out its scent into the world, and robbers are coming through, collecting at the bottom, following that smell, and wanting to get in there to get some of those resources that are being produced by your hardworking bees. So you want to keep that insert in there and close it off so they can't get to the open vent system. That's why I much prefer any bottom board. If it has screens for your integrated pest management, good on you. Make sure there's some kind of tray or some other solid barrier between your colony and the outside world. That's all I'm saying on that. Make sure that that's there. Now, what's going on with these foragers? The ones that are rolling out, they've been stung, they fall, they die, they're on the ground. What do the resident bees do with their own bees that are dying or dead? The undertaker bees get them and they fly them out away from the hive. But when there's a battle royal, you could have bees that are dead on both sides defending and those that are attacking, dying, being stung. The good news is that when you see a colony that's being robbed and bees are actively fighting as described here, the game is still on. You still have a chance to save those resident bees by putting in some kind of entrance reducer on that hive, or reducing, to what's described here, which gave them a small gate to defend, and then they were all as normal the following day, because this robbing can take place and you're losing guards on the hive. So when you come up to a hive and you see robbing is going on, all little bits of detritus are all over the landing board, and there's this frenzy. They're coming and they're going, and they zip out of there and they wiggle their abdomens around while they load up all the stuff that they just collected inside before they take off. But you don't see any more guards on that. They've been defeated. So the active fighting to me is a good sign. You can actually interact. Now there's a robbing screen made by Bee Smart Designs. It's pretty good to get a hold of if you don't have a robbing screen to keep handy. Just so that can be put there and you can stop the robbing. But reducing that entrance, good move. So I'm glad everything came together. But I also hope that we do something to close up the bottom board too. Because when the nectar is heavy as it is right now, where I live, you walk past that apiary and you're smelling honey in the air. Just it's traveling in every direction. So the good news is all the other foraging insects that are after nectar are also finding it in the environment. So right now there's peace and harmony because everyone is provided for. But that's not going to last because nectar flows come to an end. When they come to an end, colonies of bees, some of them have grown huge, and these big strong colonies are the ones that do the robbing. So when they have this great workforce and no work for them to do, that's when they start putting pressure on these smaller colonies, and that's when they can rob them out. So that's coming here in the Northeast. Be ready. And close things down. Make sure that your weaker colonies have small entrances to protect. And there's one more note he says here. I tried looking into insurance as a backyard beekeeper. My search led me to a quote of around $800 a year. I would hope that there are policies better suited for a hobbyist, as I believe the one I got didn't offer a policy that wasn't at least in part for commercial sales. Do you have any insurance companies that you know of that provide reasonable coverage for the backyard beekeeper? Well, that's interesting because I actually talked to my insurance company about my own insurance because I was worried. I'm a photographer. I take people's portraits. I use my own land for that. I have honeybees here. What if somebody's here to get their picture taken and they get stung by a bee? Am I covered? Yes, I'm covered. What if I have beehives and I'm selling honey and somebody doesn't like the honey or they get a reaction to the honey and they want to sue me over that? Does my homeowner's policy cover me, or do I need to get some kind of addendum? Do I need some extra coverage to take care of that? No, I'm covered. Now, I'm not covered, and I get mine through a company called Erie Insurance, which is present in more than 5 different states. So it's part of my regular homeowner policy. That's good news. No increase in my premium. Now, if I want additional coverage, for example, on my equipment, or if I'm trying to guarantee my product like agricultural insurance, where if I lost all my bees to a bear, by the way, the Fish and Game Commission will compensate people for their first bear attack. They'll compensate you for all the equipment that you lost. And of course, this is state by state, but these are places to look into when you've suffered a loss through your bees. So one is protection, liability protection against somebody getting stung that's on your property that happens to be there for a reason other than for bees. And I have to make that distinction because one of the things they said to me was, now Fred, when you start that Way to Bee Academy, which is my future plan, to have a building here on my property where people come to learn about bees and to see all the different hive configurations and go through different seasons. And so we have this great kind of wilderness classroom environment where we go out as half, if the weather's good, the class goes out and we get hands-on training with beehives. And when the weather's bad or we're just teaching theory, we're inside. And inside this building, we also have observation hives so that people can look at the bees, study the bees, learn about the bees in no matter what the weather is doing, the Way to Bee Academy. What do you think about that? Sounds good? Because there won't be a lot of students there, but when I do it, my insurance is going to increase because now I'm profiting from the bees in the form of teaching bees, bringing people here for that specific purpose, and therefore I have to up my liability insurance, and so it goes. So, but you should not be paying $800. I did another YouTube about insurance. There is bee-specific insurance out there, and you can Google that and find out what level of insurance you might need, but none of them were $800 a year. None of them. And that's for sideliners, small scale, backyard beekeepers that are selling their honey, things like that to protect you. So those are interesting. If you've got screen bottom boards, make sure they're closed up in some other way, you still benefit from the integrated pest management if they fall through the screen but end up in a tray or something and can't get back up into the hive. What you don't end up doing is getting a whole bunch of wide open venting, which some people swear by, and I'm convinced that the entrance is enough venting for your entire colony of bees. They're very efficient at moving the air around. Moving on to number 12. This is Bryce Bennett in New Hampshire. I'm a beginning beekeeper in the Lakes region in central New Hampshire, zone 4 to 5, depending on if you're at the bottom or the top of the hill, elevation approximately 550 feet. On August 10th, my buddy sends me a video of Dr. Leo's design, a modified deep 18-inch home-built 6-frame swarm trap. So we're moving along, and I set the trap out. My success rate after 2 years is 0.08 or 8%, but I have bees. I drove 1.5 hours to retrieve my trap. At dark, I was able to smoke the 15 or 20 bees on the face of the hive inside, and I closed it up. The stainless steel entrance disc worked great, and upon arriving back home, I had a swarm box on the side of my homemade 14-frame modified insulated lay-ins hive and opened the entrance. The next day, August 11th, I transferred the frames around 1 p.m. in sunny, warm weather. The bees were rocking. I had placed 1 frame of old brood comb, 2 frames of Dr. Leo's foundation, and 3 frames of foundationless. There were 4 frames that were 60 to 70% brood and larvae. Not much for stores, but the foundationless frames were also completely drawn out. I don't think I could have left them another week. The transfer went smooth, no gloves, no stings. I then added 4 frames of better comb and 4 frames of foundation and closed the hive, now the 14th. And the hive is doing fine as observed from the landing board. I will check on them on 8/21. I've been advised to feed them 1-to-1 sugar syrup, but I'm hesitant to do so with the fall goldenrod flow just starting. I thought I might be able to determine if sugar syrup was necessary when I inspect on the 21st. Do you think that determination is possible at that time, and what might I be looking for besides the elusive queen? Okay, so here's the thing. This is a very easy answer. There are 4 frames in there, and these are Latham hive frames. They're deeper than the standard deep Langstroth frames. 60% of those each were brood, so I conservatively guesstimate that there are 24,000 bees soon to be occupying that colony, that hive in that colony. So I wouldn't feed them. Heck no. The beginning of a nectar flow coming on, and you would have to put one of those frame feeders in there, by the way, which I don't even like in my lay-ins hive, so I'm not feeding my lay-ins at all. I'm letting them get what they need from the environment. Guess who else says to do that? Dr. Leo says to let your bees get that on their own. And there's a lot of bees in this hive. It sounds like they're doing good in every other regard. Therefore, with the nectar flow coming in, just starting out, goldenrod, asters, all that stuff coming up, let them go. Let them fill those resources, because I will bet you they're going to do that. So when you've got this many bees in a hive and you're thinking, and you've got somebody going, oh, you need to feed those because you just put them in because that's a swarm. Well, that swarm's established. Those bees are really reproducing well. So the next part of that question was, what should I be looking for when I get back in there aside from the queen? Well, you want to see what kind of resources they stored up. You want to make sure to add the frames that you need at that point if you haven't already added enough. I would look at them in the middle of that nectar flow and make sure you have enough frames for them to build out, because you want to see eggs. Once you see the eggs, get out of there. There's a queen. There's a queen within the last 3 days if you see eggs in there. So the population is strong. Everything else is going on. I would not feed those bees. Moving on to question number 13. I have a flow hive that I've had since June. I'm not putting the super on right now, so trying to get the colony ready for winter. I've been purchasing other hive parts, deeps and mediums, both, so that I have equipment when this hive grows, but also so that next spring I can start another hive with the non-flow equipment. I've noticed that the flow equipment's not exactly the same dimensions as the standard hives. I notice this because I put a slatted rack between my flow base and my flow brood box. It is slightly bigger than the flow equipment. The difference is not huge, but it's there. Has that difference in size ever caused you issues? And do those components mix and match with standard hive equipment? What made me think about this was the insulated inner cover that you're working with. Does that work okay with Flow Hive components? The difference in size are not an issue? There are several non-flow components that I'm considering, but I don't want to be in a situation where I buy something and then it will not work. Okay, so yes, Flow Hives, like the one right up here. The 7-frame Flow Super is compatible with 10-frame Langstroth hives. There is a difference in outside dimension. What's the difference? It's a 1/4 inch, so that's an 1/8 inch on each side. The Flow Hive itself is a little narrower. Let's get right to the meat of it. Will that work with the new insulated, oh look, I have one right here. Be Smart Designs insulated inner cover slant feeding shim. Will Flow Hives work with that? No, they don't work. They don't fit. Because what's at the bottom? These insulated inner covers, the ultimate inner cover by Be Smart Designs, has these little pegs sticking down. I don't know if you can see them. This thing is compatible, these little pegs, with 8 or 10 frame Langstroth equipment. But the way this is designed, when you set that on a Flow Super or the Flow brood boxes that you'll be keeping through winter, it doesn't fit. But here's the thing. When I configure my Flow Hives for winter, I have the deep brood box, that Flow design. Flow Hive does not make a medium honey super. They don't. So you do. So you get that medium honey super because you got the deep brood box, medium super on that. That's to get your bees through winter. So you're already going to put a standard dimension Langstroth medium super on your deep box to get your bees through winter. And that is going to be wall-to-wall honey for your bees, not for you, for the bees. Because you had to put that on the hive and it overshadows an 1/8 of an inch on each side, the Flow brood box down below, the stand and everything else, that medium box will accept that insulated inner cover for winter. So I don't think you'd be putting a single deep and then that inner cover insulated on your Flow deep directly. You need another super, honey super first, and you're taking your Flow supers off for wintertime anyway. At least if you're where, you know, things are going to really get cold and there's a winter dearth and all that stuff, Flow Super goes, insulated inner cover goes on, or whatever kind of cover that you're going to use. And that facilitates you giving them dry feed in winter and stuff too. So those are the options. But if you have pure Flow Hive equipment only, that insulated inner cover will not fit. I already tried it. Doesn't work. So I hope that helps. And now we're at question number 14, the last question of the day. So here we go, from Timothy Mitchell. Let's see. Hello, Fred. I'm sitting here looking at a jar of crystallized honey that my wife added water to and to the consistency to become more honey-like would flow out of the container. My question to you is, because it's never mentioned, what is the water content of crystallized honey? Might this be a way of reducing overall water content in higher percentages of nectar and honey? So there's two things that I already answered this because he was having this discussion with his wife, and I wanted Timothy to know right away what I thought. But if you've got crystallized honey like this and you want to liquefy it, don't add water to it to do that. You'll end up with honey that has a high water percentage and you risk fermentation. Anything over 18% to 19% can ferment potentially. Anything over 19% likely will ferment. So that's the problem. 18 to 19% water may, 19 and above likely will ferment. So the other thing is, what is the moisture content? This comes up from time to time because it's solidified. I mean, the water in it can't be very much, right? So how would you find out? Well, take this solidified honey and you re-liquefy it. Now, based on what we talked about today already, what temperature would I put this jar in the water and not set it directly on the bottom of a pan? What I do is I take those canning lids, the metal ones, and I put them on the bottom of a big pan on the stove, and then I set these on top of that. so they're not in direct contact with the bottom, so we don't overheat just one part of it. So it creates a water jacket, heats up. What's the temperature? 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So you slowly heat it up and you reliquefy it. Now then you can take this reliquefied honey and you can put that in your refractometer, which I recommend every backyard beekeeper have one of those if you want to know the water percentage, and you should, because you need to know what the risks are. And you're going to find out this is still at 15.5%, 16%, 17%. Whatever it was when you originally harvested it while it was in its liquid state, you'll find when you reliquefy it that remains the same, unless you took this lid off when you're reliquefying it and there's a bunch of steam around and it took on moisture. That's when, what would you see at the top edge? If it started to take on moisture from the environment while you're liquefying it, you'll see a foam up there. What's that stuff going to be? Hydrogen peroxide. So, no, the percentage of moisture will remain the same even though it's solidified. I know, interesting. It doesn't seem like it would be, but you liquefy it, test it, you're going to find out. I mark the tops of my jars with the water percentage at the time that it's harvested. That way I know. So that was the last one. Thank you for being here today. If you are brand new, I hope it was worth your time. If you're a returning viewer, thank you for being here. Don't forget to listen to the podcast via Podbean, The Way to Be. Don't forget to click the like button down here so you know that you watched this episode, because there's 122 of them. And guess what's coming up? We're going to be looking at more hives, because that inspection turned out to be something that people really like to see, a step-by-step, start-to-finish inspection of the beehive. We're going to do that. What are we going to look at? We're going to look at the storm swarm. That's that swarm that went through the storm overnight that we hived, and we did not give them drawn foundation. We just put in heavy wax foundation, and we're comparing those new Cerecell frames in there too. They're looking good for the landing board. We're going to do that inspection. Eli's hive. Remember, I had Eli here from New Mexico, and we went through a hive and we found out they were queenless. We introduced a queen in a frame with some brood, and we fortified that hive because they were queenless and there was a queen cell. What happened to that queen cell? Some people said cut it out. Would have been a good idea to cut it out, but remember I said it didn't look well attended, didn't look like they were going to take care of that queen cell. And so we left it in there even though we put the new queen in, and guess what the bees did? They chewed out the cell from the side and they harvested out that queen. So they have one queen, the one we marked. We're going to do a follow-up inspection on that too. So that's coming up. If the weather cooperates and we don't get rain all the time from some big storm named Fred. So don't forget what's tomorrow, World Bee Day. Tell all your friends, wear your t-shirts, put your pins on, spread the word about bees and that you're a beekeeper and that you want everybody to know that and you're proud of it. So that's it. Thank you for being here today. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. So as soon as I finish my Q&A, my wife comes running in and says, "Swarm outside." So stick around, I'm going to show you how I collect at least half of them and keep them from flying off over a cornfield. It occurred to me, I have this queen mandibular pheromone, synthetic pheromone, in the fridge. Haven't used it yet. You can control swarms with this stuff, and I'm going to show you that today. This all happened unplanned. Temp queen. This is supposed to let you keep a hive thinking there's a queen present when there isn't. And I've always wanted to grab this stuff, run outside, and see if I could harvest a swarm right out of the air. So I'm using that queen clip that we used in today's episode of Questions and Answers. Took it outside, wearing gloves of course, don't want to smell like a queen myself. Hold it up in the air, and even while the bees were headed out over the cornfield, this pheromone went into the air and the bees started flying to my hand. So this is starting to look like it could be a success. So I'm going to strap it to a tree right here. See what happens. See if I can collect a swarm without a queen by faking them out with QMP, queen mandibular pheromone. You keep this stuff in the fridge. In case you have a queenless hive, it keeps the bees from turning into laying workers. But I always thought, what if I just went outside, put this thing on a tree or something, when there was a swarm nearby, Could I convince that swarm to come to my tree branch instead of flying off with their queen that's quitting my apiary? And Annette said that she saw the bees leaving from one of my nucleus colonies. Predictable. They build up really fast and they emit swarms. Of course, there's a queen gone with them. The cool thing would be is if the queen herself comes back and collects here too. But this cornfield, the bees just started coming out of it. Coming right to my queen mandibular pheromone. It's a synthetic word, I get it. I got it from Better Bee. Here I am. Super happy because it's working. It's because I'm outsmarting these bees. They're just coming from everywhere. Now we're going to see how big the collection of bees will get. It's a tool here. We could actually have put this inside a beehive, but once again, I didn't have a beehive handy, or I could have put that queen mandibular pheromone in the hive with frames and drawn the bees right through the entrance and had them all hived up, neat as a pin. But instead, we're just doing this experiment. We'll see what happens. See how many bees we can collect here. This would be in stereo, but this is the same camera that I use when I'm doing my Q&As, so it's actually a shotgun microphone mono. So I'd like to immerse you in the audio here. Instead, we're just going to see how things go. I also probably should have chosen a little heavier branch. This didn't have to be a tree branch. Could have done this on a post, piece of dowel wood, anything. I decided to do this branch, and there it sits. We'll cut ahead here and show you how quickly they assemble on this branch. It's kind of cool. Now when I'm looking around, what the bees are doing is they're zigzagging back and forth and they fly through the pheromone stream. Notice the wind is not very strong right now, but it's just enough. I see these bees coming from 50, 60 feet away. This is not a familiar pheromone to them. It's a synthetic. But I guess any queen in a storm. You can see them pick up the scent and then they just fly right over and land on this tree branch with, as far as they know, is a completely strange queen. Now what are the options with this collection of bees that left with a queen, left with a swarm? Here we are, August the 20th. Where are they going to go? Their chances are bad, but here's what I can do. Collect a bunch of bees and fortify an existing hive with them, just as you would make any split. So I can take them, put a box on a hive that's a little behind, maybe one of the new swarm hivings that we did recently. Put them in there, new sprint in between the two. Put all these in there with their synthetic queen here. Once they're set up inside, remove the synthetic queen. And then they'll combine with the existing hive. Look at this. It's starting to turn into a serious collection there. So this QMP, the synthetic queen mandibular pheromone, actually works. I mean, I'm not surprised. Are you surprised? Alright, I'm surprised. You can walk out there with your queen mandibular pheromone, interrupt a swarm stream, and curb a bunch of the foragers that were leaving with the queen and bring her back to the branch. Now what's really going to be interesting is if the bulk of that swarm comes to this branch and the queen joins them. Perfect world, because this QMP will serve as an anchor to keep them there until I can get a box ready and hive them up, or as I said before, combine with an existing colony that just needs a bigger workforce. With paper in between, of course, the same way you would do when you're combining colonies that are both queen right. 2 small colonies, 1 big one. So I just wanted to share that with you today. A special feature closing out the Q&A. I hope you found this interesting, and I will update you later on what I decide to do with my own swarm with my synthetic queen and a queen clip. Thanks for watching. Have a fantastic weekend.